All right. Well, good to be with you all. It's always fascinating, interesting to be in the Zoom world. I much prefer in person, but this makes it so much easier these days. So I'll enjoy talking to some black boxes and look forward to questions later on. Hopefully we'll have a chance for some good discussion and happy to talk through whatever you might want to ask about. So, um, again, I just want to say, first of all, to start, really want to give credit to Jamie and her team at Visit Hendricks County. I come from a tourism background, was with the state tourism office for a number of years before starting at Ball State in 2014. And it's not every day that you have someone and a team so willing to look closely at what they're doing and be honest about everything and to engage not just visitors but residents. And I give them a lot of credit for taking that step and trying to figure out how they can be the best version of promoting Hendricks County and developing Hendricks County for visitors and residents. So with that, I also want to set the stage. So at ICI, Indiana Communities Institute, we really, really take pride in working with communities of all sizes around Indiana and a little bit beyond. And one of our old directors used to say our mission from God is to spread the word on the value of quality of place and quality of life. And so this is why we're very excited to be a part of this process. And just want to set the disclaimer up front or the statement up front that we believe strongly, and we think we know the research also backs this up, that quality of place is in and of itself economic development. And so this discussion, I think for a long, long time around quality of place was, oh, that's a nice to have. That's not the case anymore. It's a must have. And I've cited a couple of research studies there that I'm happy to share and pass along to you all down the road. We won't dwell on that today, but um, it's an important endeavor for all communities to understand this dynamic of how you make places better physically, culturally, socially for everyone. So, and what role does tourism play in that? And understanding that dynamic of the DMOs, but also the tourism attractions, the communities themselves, and residents. What role do you all play in this discussion? And if you think about it, at its core, tourism is about spending leisure time doing something fun and exciting, educational, you name it. And so we're looking at leisure time as anytime you have left outside of meeting your basic needs of work and other basic needs and whether you spend that locally or go somewhere else, that's your leisure time. And so, how do you spend that time specifically to this study when you're in Hendricks County, or do you? And that's what we want to get at the bottom of. So, a quick process overview. Jamie alluded to this. Broadly speaking, with their process for this study itself, for the resident side of things, we were trying to determine where residents spend their free time, whether locally or elsewhere, why residents spend their free time where they do, wherever that may be, and then how residents feel about and interact with various amenities and activities, both inside and outside of Hendricks County. And so that is the approach we took with this research. We did it as a qualitative approach, and we did it through layering three different aspects. There was a survey, a series of open houses, and focus groups, which I'll dig into here in a bit so you understand the process. The reason why we did this is because it helps us gather feedback in a variety of ways and maybe reach people in different ways or reach different people. That is certainly key. You're not going to reach everyone. And how best can we understand the dynamics broadly speaking? This research did not and would never was intended to be a full-on statistically generalizable study, but we are very confident in the results and that they provide a robust enough picture to understand more in depth what residents feel and how they feel about the leisure time activities and amenities. I won't get into the stats of why that's the case, but this was got a lot of great feedback and it helped frame a lot of important information. So the survey was the biggest chunk of this. That's where most of the data came from. And you can see there some of the design of it was to have some qualifying questions. You had to be 18 or over to take this survey. You had to be a Hendricks County resident to take this survey. So there were some eliminating questions up front. If you weren't one of those things, you got kicked out of the survey. And then from there was a distinct path that respondents took based on whether or not they said they spent most of the time inside Hendricks County or outside Hendricks County. And those were related to motivating factors, where they might have gone. And then we came back together again. Everyone then answered a series of Likert type questions around interest levels, frequency of visitation, willingness to take visitors, and then specific to Hendricks County attractions alone, we asked the question about satisfaction with availability. So that was specific to Hendricks County amenities and activities. And if you took the survey, it asked a series of those questions to kind of give you a range of, very much or not much at all type thing. The survey was open for around 75 days, and there were some incentives offered, which was fun to try to get folks to take it. It was spread out far and wide through social media platforms, through some mailing lists, et cetera. So it was not randomized entirely, but we were as far reaching as possible in trying to reach folks. And then we had about 1,975 qualified responses. So that means there were more people who took the survey, but they might have been kicked out for not answering a question. They weren't a resident, they weren't 18, those types of things. So just shy of 2,000. So a good subset of insights to be gathered from this. We also did a series of open houses. Jamie referenced it, 6 open houses, 1 per school district. So I had a lot of fun, and our team had a lot of fun traveling around Hendricks County last spring, going to these. They were designed to be more fun, more casual, more interactive. You could come and go as you saw fit. It wasn't a sit-down discussion. We tried to reach folks. A lot of folks in Hendricks County commute, so we tried to reach people when they were coming back home from work, on their way back home or whatnot before they started their evening activities. And the goal of this was to kind of have some fun, interactive ways to understand where free time is spent, what activities and amenities are most important to people, and then what might be possible. So it was kind of like a dream element to some of the questions. But we did this through things like people got to put tokens, literally put tokens in jars based on where they think they spend their free time most, whether it be evening, daytime, weekends. So things like that. And then we did focus groups to drill down more deliberately and specifically with a subset of stakeholders. And these were commuters, because again, lots of folks in the county do commute. How does that maybe impact their perception of things as they're coming and going from work? A group of, we call it diversity. It was largely residents of color, not entirely. And we wanted to make sure that we were understanding any dynamics there that maybe weren't rising to the top in the survey that didn't allow for that depth. And then HR professionals, and also professionals who help companies recruit people to live in Hendricks County, and then small business owners. And they were generally the same questions. We have them all if you ever want to see them, but basically the point of these were to ask the same general questions, but then per different type of group, we drill down a little farther on some very specific things. For instance, in the diversity discussion, we really wanted to drill down on barriers to access, or perceptions about feeling welcome, things like that, to make sure that we were understanding the whole dynamic of things. So with that, these are some of the results. These are survey focused results. They are little bits and elements of the focus groups and houses mixed in. They really help provide color commentary to all of this. They help bolster some of the findings we found in the survey that might have said, okay, well, why is this happening, or we can't quite place this. Well, that color commentary, that feedback from those more dynamic discussions kind of help say, okay, well, maybe this is why. So a lot of the data you're seeing now will be survey focused data, with a few tidbits thrown in that we gathered from the other aspects. But as you can see, who took the survey? Vast majority, and I will say, very happy to say that geographically, all 11 towns that are incorporated in Hendricks County were represented equal to their population. So we were very, and as was Visit Hendricks County, very interested in making sure that happened. And it did, as to be expected, because they're the population centers. Nearly 3/4 of the respondents came from the 3 biggest communities. But again, every single town and burg in Hendricks County was represented relative to their population. You can see there was a mix. We want to see kind of where, how long people have been in Hendricks County. That might impact how they responded. And we dig into that more in the full report. But you can see there between 1 and 10 years was the largest chunk, as opposed to less than a year or over 10 years. This survey did skew, which is not really a surprise. It did skew heavily female and heavily white, compared to the general populations. And so we'll touch on this a little bit later. But so we had to go back in and kind of look for some things in that regard. Age-wise, a higher percentage were within that age range than the county itself has. Also skewed a bit towards commuters. I'm sorry, towards not people who do not commute. I'm sorry. And people who own their homes, which is a different dynamic. And then actually the bachelor's degree was pretty much spot on. It was a little less. So that represents some diversity there, which was great. So that's who took it. And then I'll kind of go through some select findings and from there. Cool news is the vast majority of respondents, 84%, indicated they primarily spend their leisure time in Hendricks County. We dub these stayers. So the next couple of slides, you'll see that term stayers versus goers. This is what we mean. The stayers are the people who said they primarily spend their free time in Hendricks County. This is especially true based on the feedback we got from the open houses and the focus groups when you look at free evenings and free days. But again, vast majority, I say they spend most of their time in Hendricks County. We did a little bit of demographic breakdown along the way to see it. And I will warn you and say that statistically, some of the response rates were relatively low for some of these demographics. So it was hard to really extrapolate too much weight into these things. But we wanted to note them just the same. And you'll see that number does dip a bit when it comes to residents who are Black, African American, or Latino, in terms of what they do locally, which we'll touch on here in a bit. So where do people go who choose to stay? Those 84% who say they primarily spend time in Hendricks County, where do they typically go? No surprise, it is the population centers, especially those on the eastern side of the county. And then the goers, so those 16% who say they spent most time outside of Hendricks County, where did they say they went? Downtown Indy was number one by far, and then Northside Indy, Keystone area, and then Carmel, Hamilton County. And in theory, we could go in and break down, okay, where you reside in the county, does that impact where you might go? We didn't take it to that nth degree, but it's there if it ever wants to be explored further. I will say of the stayers, we also asked where they go when they're not in Hendricks County. So back to the 84%, and downtown Indy was also the number one result for those folks. So the reasons for staying and the reasons for going, 1 through 7, we did some math here to kind of come up with those numbers based on those Likert scales. And generally speaking, convenience seemed to be a big factor in why people were choosing to spend free time in Hendricks County, whereas maybe seeking out some unique experience or having a more options might have been a motivator for going outside of, or was a motivator, I should say, for going outside of Hendricks County. You can see some overlap there, but easier to get to and familiarity with what's happening, which speaks to the work that Hendricks County does. I will say that, and I want to make note of this, in the diversity focus group, there was a long discussion about among some of the people who participated in how they viewed opportunities within the county. And they did tend to say, which speaks a little bit to this number, the lower numbers among residents of color. Still high, don't get me wrong, but a little lower, and in part because maybe they don't feel like they have quite the cultural offerings locally that they would in Indianapolis. So, and then some key themes here that emerged. I'm a foodie, so I love this. We are motivated to spend free time a lot by restaurants and dining out. Sure, you could track that with national trends as well. So it's very much a popular activity for residents to do in their free time. And you can see there, I'm going to move my little screen around so I can see. You can see that the 80% of residents are extremely or very interested in restaurants within Hendricks County. And they're nearly 70% are likely to take an out-of-town visitor to a restaurant in Hendricks County when they come to visit. We heard anecdotally through some of the focus groups and open houses that while people love the restaurants, there is some interest in diversifying the options, um, maybe creating more culinary experiences, wineries, breweries, things like that that go beyond restaurants. And this is outdoor amenities, another popular driver of free time. People love parks and trails in Hendricks County, had a lot of positive things to say about them. Again, you see they're 80%, so they are very interested, extremely interested in exploring outdoor amenities within the county, and they extremely likely, again, this is the highest level, extremely likely to take an out-of-town visitor to a local outdoor amenity. Um, and there was, again, some anecdotal discussion at some of these more in-depth conversations around connectivity to parks, the great parks that the individual communities have. How could they maybe be better connected between community to community or community to neighborhoods? And then also, yeah, just how do you continue to invest in these and make them accessible to more people? So. And then I did want to point out, and again, I haven't seen the full, which is my fault, the full visitor discussion here. And again, there is a Venn diagram between residents and visitors and what they like. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there's not. That's to be expected. And so obviously a strong tradition in motorsports in your county. From a local resident standpoint, there was pretty significant numbers of people who say that are not really that interested in it themselves. Does it speak to any other feeling about it, but they're just not interested in it themselves? We were asked when we first presented to the board, because of the skew female male in this to go back and look at those crosstabs. And so there is a difference. 35% of females said this, not at all interested, whereas 22% of males said it. But still, it was the highest number either way, male or female, of any other comparative amenity or attraction. And then they're unlikely to take an out-of-town visitor, 38%. And those are pretty high numbers. We're going to come to another number later that speaks to this in terms of frequency of visitation, comparing to other options, but these were two that were pretty extreme outliers within the survey. And then frequency of use, and these are just the top two frequented types of amenities and attractions inside of Hendricks County. And based on daily, weekly, monthly, and 1 or 2 times a year, and then never were the liker options. And you can see here how that breaks down. And no surprise probably on any of this. I don't think we found anything that was too crazy. It stands to reason that people think about events and festivals a little bit because they're not every day, right? So that would happen more on a monthly basis or 1 or 2 times a year basis. Same with rural amenities. I'm guessing there's probably some correlation between rural amenities and events and festivals, those fall festivals that happen in rural amenities that 1 or 2 times a year, those seasonal things. So yeah, you can see that people are frequently using restaurants and outdoor amenities and retail stores, still interested in other things, but doing it less frequently. And then you see that high number again for the never of motorsports. And no surprise at event centers and meeting spaces. We don't typically think about them probably as we're deciding what to do. We're probably thinking more instead of the home show at the fairgrounds. You're not thinking about the fairgrounds themselves. And then just to compare that to outside, a lot of similarities here. Restaurants came up pretty high, so there is a little leakage there in terms of going out of the county, but it's no surprise again given how close you are to Marion County, Indianapolis. And then this is likelihood of taking visitors. This is everything. So you can see not everything, but on the scale of extremely likely or extremely unlikely. So the two extremes, red shade is inside, gray shade is outside. And we pre-populated, I should have said this sooner, but all these questions have these pre-populated options for amenities and activities with explainers where needed. So you can split hairs on a couple of these and say, well, is it that or is it this? So you're going on people's perceptions. We did try to steer them and say, okay, this is what we mean by outdoor amenity versus rural amenity, for example. And so this is what they were responding to, what you all responded to. Again, restaurants came out very high for where you would take visitors, along with outdoor amenities and then events and festivals. Um, and those are also the top three outside from an extremely likely standpoint. So those are across the board popular amenities and activities. And then unlikely, um, inside and outside also relatively similar, with a few discrepancies. More activities and attractions are done. You're more likely to do that outside the county. Those were things like, if I recall, axe throwing, things like that.
I wanted to add, Brian,
Yeah.
one of the big things that we noticed was this survey was done between the months of February, March, and April of 2024. And so one of our largest Austin cultural amenities, Hendricks Live, was not open. And
Yes.
so it's important to note that one of our, primary venues for that wasn't open. And so we do wonder if that number would look a little different now, given that there is a performing arts venue in Hendricks County that's a little more
Yes.
available. So that I just wanted to point that out.
And thank you. Yeah, and I don't think I put it in here, but because there was, you could see some data in there that if you look closely enough, that suggested that people want those arts and cultural amenities, and maybe felt like they had to go beyond the county sometimes to do it. But again, with that new product coming on, this will be interesting to baseline it down the road to see if that changes. I'm sure it will. So this is satisfaction with the amount of opportunity. Does Hendricks County have enough of these things? So this is only pertaining to Hendricks County. And you see you see them all there. Gray being has enough, red being needs more. Um, and the has enough top three responses. Clearly, people think there's enough motorsports in the county, enough event centers and meeting spaces. Although I will say, anecdotally, we did hear a couple of folks in the focus groups and open houses suggest that maybe there wasn't enough. But over by and large across the bigger numbers, there was a feeling that there was enough, and there's also enough retail stores and shopping centers. Um, and we didn't actually differentiate there between large, small, local, not local, just to note that. And then needs more events and festivals, arts and cultural amenities. This goes back to, I think, a little bit what Jamie was saying too. If you took that now or take that in a year from now, that number, they may feel like there is enough because of that added products. And then activities and attractions would be next. So, and I'm going a little faster, so I'm happy to go back and entertain any more any other slides. But again, just to recap, residents overwhelmingly spend their free time in Hendricks County. They spend it locally, whether typically because of reasons of convenience and ease of access, which stands to reason. I don't think that's a surprise. But I think with more work, getting folks maybe who are going out of the county because they feel like there's more to do, convincing them that there is in fact things to do in the county through development, through marketing, et cetera. But I do feel like, especially looking at residents of color, a feeling that maybe there wasn't quite enough to do for their taste and interest. The bigger communities are where most people are spending their time. Again, no surprise, Des and Indianapolis being the number one outside of the county. And then what you all do with your free time, dining again, hugely popular. Could be some improvements around uniqueness of food options and experiences, outdoor amenities, outdoor recreation, loving the parks and trails. Is there more to connect them to each other? And then again, motorsports came out pretty clearly as something that residents wise, again, maybe not something they're going to do in their free time. And then I want to note too that there could be some demographic differences. We did drill down quite a bit into this with the caveat that the responses were pretty low for as you started to parse them out in various demographics. Some of the responses were pretty low, so it's hard to extrapolate out from that, and it would require a little more research of our interest. But I think there's some we call out a few things along the way. Like for instance, you could tell, you could make some assumptions around age groups and likelihood of having children, and how that maybe elevated their interest in rural activities, as example. So there were some minor things in there that we called out, but would require more research to really know for sure. With that, I'm happy to, and let me show you this slide if you want to write this down. Then I can exit out of here, and you all we can have a discussion. But this is my information if you ever want to reach us or have additional questions for myself or for our researchers. I'm happy to answer them. So with that, Jamie, do you mind if I close out here or?
Go right ahead.
Okay, let me. It was a little fast, I know. So let me know what questions you all may have.
So feel free to put your questions in the chat or unmute yourself, and we'll take some questions. I want to address a couple things there at the end that Brian mentioned that is things we can improve upon. And so a lot of this led into our new mission and vision that we released in November. And so in our mission statement, we mentioned residents as a primary audience that we are supporting. And here at Visit Hendricks County, we truly believe that residents are our customer. At the end of the day, we've talked a lot about, as a destination organization, who do we ultimately serve? And it is the resident, because that is who we provide a benefit to. By developing product and creating a visitor economy, the residents are the ones who get that value. They have more things to do. The visitor economy provides money that comes into the community that ultimately lowers their taxes, and that's a long number story. But that is our goal, is to provide a quality of life that the residents can feel. And we're going to do that through a couple of ways. And so one program that we've already created, you mentioned dining. And so we've had this research for a couple of months. And so we've already started with the Hendricks County Flavor Fest. Some of you may have seen some of our advertising. And Kyle Johnson, our new Director of Vice President of Marketing Strategy, was one of the first programs that he created when he came here. So I'd like Kyle to talk a little bit about Flavor Fest, why we did it, and how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that our top, leisure activity for our residents is visiting our restaurants, and 67% think that we don't have enough events and festivals. So, what we looked at was, is there a downtime for those restaurants? Is there a time of year where they have, slower, pace of business? And we met with 3 of those restaurateurs, and they said, hey, don't even bother in January. Everybody's set a New Year's resolution and they're not going to eat. They said, we've got the Devour Indie that a lot of us participate in, so we don't really need anything there. We're really good on Valentine's Day, which is a Friday this year, so that should be really busy. But they said there's a lull right after that. So if we could do something in February to early March. And so what we came up with was Flavor Fest. And basic premise is, we're not asking anything from our restaurants. We're not asking them to do a discount. We're not asking them to pay to be a part of it. But we are asking them, can you create something new that goes on your menu, something we can promote? And then we will promote that. The event goes from February 17th to March 17th, and we will be promoting it as diners go and experience a restaurant. They'll scan a QR code, let us know they were there, and then we're going to give out gift cards that we're purchasing from some of those restaurants that are participating. So we've already got 30 restaurants on board, and new ones being added all the time. So excited to get that one launched. We announced it a week ago, and we're already seeing some traffic from it. So really excited about that, and kicks off on February 17th. So make sure you go and visit one of the participating restaurants during that time frame, and maybe you could win some gift cards.
And so these are the kind of programs that we are able to glean and develop based on just that little portion of the research. And we have, piles of research. This is, the second of three research studies. So we have a dozen more opportunities, and that led to also the development of the new position that we've hired Philip Dywick for. And so by having a director of destination development, we'll be able to take this research. And so as we talked about restaurants, outdoor activities, and events and festivals, part of his role will be evaluating what are the things that we can influence and program and develop, whether that's with time, talent, or finances, to create a quality of place. Quality of place is built, quality of life is felt. And what can our organization do to help develop and mold that for Hendricks County and all 11 of our towns to create an environment that helps businesses and residents and visitors thrive? And so this is all part of it. So I'll open it up for other questions. Our entire staff is on here. We're happy to, anyone can answer anything. And then obviously Brian lived this research. We survived a very difficult near tornado at Cascade High School. So he's one of us now. So feel free to ask him anything.
I will say I gotta come out for Flavor Fest. That's I will travel for food. We will travel for food, so that sounds exciting.
Julia asks, do we even know what type of events people are looking for? That's a fantastic question. Our research didn't really go into the depth of that, Brian.
No.
But I think that this research will lead to additional research. We're fortunate that Tracy Whetstone, who's been with us 16 years, 16 years, we've been involved in a number of events throughout the county. So I think we'll have additional research that'll need to be done about what kinds of things that people will be looking for. Danville has done research over the past, dozen years about what types of events are considered signature events versus supporting events. And I think that'll be the conversations that we have is, do we need signature events? Do we need supporting events? Do we have events that could go into multi-day events that tie around certain themes, right? When we look at diversity and cultural inclusion and social inclusion. So I think that those are the conversations we'll be having. And I think this is the beginning. Granted, this is a lot of research, but there's still more research to be had.
Yeah, I would also add, we have some tools that we could look into. What are the events that we have that we're hosting that have the best attendance? And are there other types of events that fit that mold that we could add to? Can we expand those events? So a lot of tools that we have in the toolbox that we could use to analyze those things.
And I will say too, really quickly, it did not, this research, especially the survey, did not really dig into that, as Jimmy said. And I have to go back and look at some of the feedback from the open houses where we would have probably gotten the most feedback about that, because there was a little more open-ended discussion. But it was a pretty small sample size. So take it with a grain of salt. But most of what I presented today is based on the survey, but there might be some tidbits that we can glean from the other discussions. I see a question here for me. So yes and no. Do we parse the data based on demographics? There are a million avenues that we could take with this and spend years dissecting it. We did dig into, because there was such a skew female male, and we didn't do this across the board for everything, but some key questions we did look at, like for instance, the motorsports. Is there a difference between, is this high because females aren't interested in motorsports, or is it something else? So we did look at things like that, very specific questions around gender, around race and ethnicity, and then around age were the three that we kind of dug into. In theory, you could go in and say, okay, people from Brownsburg, does it differ from people from Avon? We didn't parse that. It's there down the road if people want to. And the only caveat being, again, that the sample sizes the more you parse it, the smaller the sample sizes get and the less reliable the data is. And phase of life, phase of life, we did age cohorts. We didn't necessarily, which you can make some assumptions about. I know age is not necessarily 100% correlated to phase because I'm an older dad, so I can say that for sure. But so we didn't really go phase of life or that, more age, basically.
And we also had a lot of conversation internally, as we look through the demographics, we know that usually the female head of household is the one making free time decisions. And so, and then, typically children also drive the event activities, right? So we knew that these demographics, those people that were answering the survey were typically the decision makers in the household group. So we were comfortable with that. Our bigger issue internally at Visit Hendricks County was making sure that we had a representative sample of all of the towns. We wanted to make sure that this did not skew heavy to the urban areas or the rural areas, and that we were able to qualitatively represent all 11 of our communities. And I think that was what we really kind of leaned in on. So that was important to us, which we were able to get to. And so we had to kind of forego, you would really love to have had a more diverse sample, absolutely. But we had to kind of pick and choose which ones were the most important to get to. And so we leaned heavily into making sure the entire county was represented. Because I think that's something that we don't always get when we look at county data. And I think this was actually, it was harder to get people to answer this survey. We joked about it at times because we were not asking what was wrong. People would want to come tell us everything they didn't like. We're like, yeah, well, that's not what we're asking. We would like to know what you like about where you live. And so people were like, oh, really? No one's ever asked me that before. And so it was a really fun exercise to be able to get to that. So that was a little harder, but it was certainly fun.
And I will say, the response, we're always mindful of making a survey too long, of course. Sometimes you have to ask certain questions, you want to take advantage of it. So it's a tricky art and science there. But I will say most people stuck with the survey. I mean, you see some of the questions later on don't get as much response as earlier questions, things like that. But it was a pretty dedicated group who did answer the questions, and they put some time into thinking through it. So I think that's a testament to those residents who care and want to weigh in, and good, bad, or otherwise. Going back to the demographic really quickly too, one thing to say is, I mean, we did point out some things that could be potentially some differences in that group, but across the board, things were relatively the same regardless of demographic, with a few, again, minor things here and there.
Shout out to the Brownsburg older
Town hall.
Brownsburg Town Hall event. We had a large contingency there. They were the most well attended. So shout out to Brownsburg for that. Outside of these webinars, is there a plan to share VHC's strategic pillars, missions with residents, businesses? Well, actually, this started with November 19th. We had a launch with over about 100 people in attendance. So we actually launched the strategic plan and mission first with residents and businesses. We've had a number of articles in our local newspapers. We've been sharing it through our business channels and LinkedIn. We have a brochure that we've had made that we take as we meet with people. We have an advocacy plan that we're building. We actually just went to RFP, request for proposals, for a new marketing company, for a new brand. Shout out to all of you on here with marketing companies. Yes. So short answer is yes. So we have this webinar. This is the second of 3. We have the third. After the third, then our board has approved the full strategic plan. Then that will be posted just for available use. But really it's a document that then our leadership team will be using in conversations with all 11 of our communities, our county officials, but it will be available, and it has been available since November 19th. Oh, and she loves the brochure. Julia loves the brochure. Of course you do. I love it too. And you can download a copy of the brochure that I'm talking about at the link that Kyle put in the chat earlier. We can drop it in there again. This is the Destination Defined brochure. It does have the top 10 research findings from all 3 of the studies. So you can see that there. It's kind of on a second paragraph or so, and it has what we believe to be the top 10 findings. These webinars just go into a lot more detail about the individual resident community, and next week we'll get into the visitor data and brand awareness and halo effect of marketing. So it's a much more detailed marketing conversation next week. Other questions? Chris, when was the last time VHC conducted research concerning resident activities, and do you observe any significant changes? This was the first time that Visit Hendricks County has conducted research concerning resident activities. The Hendricks County Community Foundation did a community needs assessment in 2019 and 2022 that is really more on social services. And this was the first time I'm aware of in my 22 years here that anyone has asked the residents, what do you do in your free time? That being said, we do have a research plan going forward where this is our benchmark. We will use it going forward in resident sentiment. I don't know if we will do something as extensive as this going forward, but we will be using this as a benchmark. And Kim Fox is on here. She's our senior R&D manager, and so she will be using it to build KPIs to look back on.
Yeah, and I would think, this is a huge study, so if we were gonna do it again, it wouldn't be really soon, but it, would be interesting in 5 years or so to measure, did we initiate any change in how things are perceived by our residents, so.
Yeah, and that's a goal we were actually just talking about yesterday at a different event where we were speaking. If you look at the events and festivals, right? So you have people that are going out of the county 1 to 2 times of the month, and in the county, if they're going out of the county 62% of the time and in the county 54% of the time, you would expect if we're going to invest time and money and effort into creating more events and festivals or extending them into multi-day, you would want those numbers to change. You would want the in-county number to go up, right? You would want them to be going more percentage, so 70% of people going in the county and less people going out of the county, right? So that's how you would use these numbers to benchmark and measure in the future.
If you don't mind, I would also add to Kyle referenced earlier, but qualitative data takes a lot of time and effort to do. And it's still based on people's perceptions of things that they do, which aren't always accurate. It's the best you can do. But as Kyle mentioned, there's a lot of cool technology out there that can help you more quantitatively say, okay, they say they're doing this. Do the numbers actually track that from a quantitative standpoint? So that'll be something that I'm sure you all can help look at too. So.
You got very quiet there, Brian.
Oh, I don't know what happened. Sorry.
That's okay.
Did you hear me at all, or?
I can hear you now. Maybe it was my little owl.
My computer is weird sometimes, so I apologize. I was just saying, comparing the qualitative with the hard data that you're going to get through some of your other research mechanisms will be interesting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at attendance and, money spent, sales tax, all that stuff. Brian's going to be in the parking lot counting license plates. Like we used to do back in the old days. Anybody else? Okay, well, not seeing anyone else. We've been a very quiet group today. So I see a lot of thank yous. I'm starting to see some faces. We will edit the recording and we will post that on the page later today, along with a copy of the presentation. If you have any questions, please email us. You have Brian's information. If you didn't catch that, please email me or Kyle and we'll get it to you. And then we meet again next week. If you haven't registered for that, you can register on that same link. We would love to have you join us to talk about the visitor research. And we are excited to continue walking through this process. So we look forward to seeing you all again next week. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Brian, for spending the morning with us. Always lovely to see you. You did an awesome
Thank you.
job as always, and congratulations
Thank
for
you.
your
Appreciate it.
recent promotion. So we're very excited for you.
Thanks all.
So, thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy your heat wave out there at a whopping 31 degrees. So enjoy. Take care. Oh, wait.